The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's Knapford Station. Every day is a busy day at Knapford. Carriages rattle and roll, and passengers and porters pack the platforms. Knapford Station is also a place for special events. One day, Sir Topham Hatt presented Gordon with special coaches. Gordon had set a new record for pulling the express. Then Emily arrived with a special prize for Diesel. He had set a new record too. He had shunted more freight cars than any other Diesel. Everyone cheered. Knapford Station is also a place where racers are started. Once, Spencer arrived. He boasted that he was faster than all the Sodor engines. Then Sir Topham Hatt announced that he had a special for Edward. Edward was to take the Duke and Duchess's furniture to their summer house. Spencer wanted to have a race. Edward was worried. Spencer's bigger boiler only means more hot air, tooted Thomas. And by the end of the day, Edward proved that he could win the race. Knapford Station is also very special for one engine, and that's Thomas. It was the day of Sir Topham Hatt's mother's birthday party. All Thomas's ideas for her celebration had gone wrong. Then Thomas had his best idea ever. He would have the party for Sir Topham Hatt's mother at Knapford Station. The station never looked more wonderful. There were flags and flowers and fine food. Thomas gave one toot, and then one after the other. All the engines hooted and tooted and whistled and blew, "Happy birthday to you." Sir Topham Hatt's mother smiled from ear to ear. Thomas thought this was his best idea yet. So that's why Knapford Station is a very special place for Thomas. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right, it's Gordon's Hill. Gordon's Hill is one of the great Sodor landmarks. Engines puff and engines huff, trying to climb the steep slope. And then, engines wheesh and engines whoosh as they race down the other side. It was the winter holiday season. "Whichever engine finishes their job first," said Sir Topham Hatt, "can pull the presents train." James was grumpy. He had to work with Edward. Edward wasn't fast enough for James. But when they got to the top of Gordon's Hill, James was excited. The tracks were slippy and slidey. James cried, "This is the way to go fast!" James thought it was the best slide ever. Sometimes Gordon gets stuck on Gordon's Hill. The express can be very heavy, even for a big, strong engine like Gordon. So Gordon's driver calls for Edward. Edward may be old, but he's the best back engine there is. Edward buffers up at the back of the express. He huffs and he puffs. He shoves and he shunts, and he always gets Gordon up Gordon's hill. There's another engine who thought he couldn't make it to the top. That's Toby. One day, Toby had to pull heavy milk trucks up Gordon's hill. He puffed and he huffed until he got to the top, but it was hard work. Later that day, Gordon was stuck on the hill with the express. So Topham Hatt sent Toby to be Gordon's back engine. Gordon groaned that Toby would never be able to push him to the top. He was only a steam tram. Toby didn't like being called only a steam tram. He thought of what his friend Thomas had told him. "You can do it, Toby," Thomas puffed. And Toby knew he could. Toby the steam tram pushed Gordon and the express to the top of Gordon's hill. So that's why Gordon's hill is special for Toby. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's the Sodor Island Suspension Bridge. The Suspension Bridge is one of many beautiful bridges on the island of Sodor. There are lots of bridges. And every day, the engines puff across the bridges as they go about the island being really useful. Sometimes a bridge can be dangerous, especially if it's broken. One day, Neville, the new engine, was puffing towards the old bridge. Neville was new to the island. He didn't know the bridge was broken. Then he saw the danger flags and the barrier. But he was going too fast to stop. He crashed through the barrier and applied his brakes hard. Thomas steamed in. Neville was very scared. "Help me, Thomas." Thomas quickly buffered up to Annie and Clarabelle. Slowly and steadily, Thomas began to pull Neville back from the edge. And with one big puff, Neville was pulled to safety. Neville was safe and sound, and it was all thanks to his new friend, Thomas. Thomas likes all the bridges, but there's one that is very special for him, and that's the Sodor Suspension Bridge. One night, there was a terrible storm. The bridge twisted and shook in the gales, and with a terrible crack, it fell into the valley below. When Thomas saw what had happened to his favorite bridge, he was sad. He wanted to help repair it. The bridge needed a new steel beam. It was very heavy. Thomas pushed the beam all the way from the docks. That had been hard work, but now he had to work even harder. Very slowly and very steadily, Thomas rolled forward so that the cables round the beam were pulled tight. Very slowly and very steadily, the beam lowered to the ground. It went lower and lower until at last the beam was in place. Thomas had never been so proud. So that's why the Sodor Suspension Bridge is very special for Thomas. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's Farmer McColl's farm. There are lots of farms on Sodor. They have fields of green grass and yellow waving wheat. At Farmer McColl's farm, there are cows and sheep and chickens. Thomas and his friends toot hello to the farmers and animals. One day, Gordon had to move cows to their new shed in Farmer McColl's field. Gordon was in a hurry. He moved away too quickly. The car doors weren't properly fastened. Luckily, Henry was waiting at a signal. He saw what was happening and knew just what to do to help. Henry chuffed off slowly towards the new shed. The cows followed. They were hungry. They munched on the hay on Henry's flatbed. Gordon learned it's better to be slow. Emily learned that too when she wanted to help Thomas. One night, Emily met Thomas at a signal. She had been to the carnival. Thomas really wanted to go to the carnival, but he still had a lot of jobs to do. Emily told Thomas she'd take his train to the farm so he could go to the carnival. But Emily didn't know the vans were full of chickens. Emily raced away. The chickens squawked and cawed, but Emily wheezed on. Thomas caught up with her. He told her there were chickens in the cars. They must go slowly, he puffed. Farmer McColl's farm is very special for one engine. And that's Thomas. One day, Thomas had been working very hard. He had lots of jobs. He still had to take chickens to the market, sheep to Farmer McColl's farm, and the children to school. By the time Thomas had picked up the children, Thomas was very tired. And he was getting confused. So Thomas took the chickens to school, the sheep to market, and the children to Farmer McColl's farm. But the children had a wonderful day. They helped Farmer McColl, and they were very happy to be covered in mud and straw. So that's why Farmer McColl's farm is very special for Thomas. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right, it's the high hills of Sodor. The high hills of Sodor are home to the narrow gauge engines. Rusty, Peter, Sam, and Duncan, Scarloey, Rheneas, Sir Handel, Mighty Mac, and Fearless Freddy. Every day, the engines come and go through the transfer yards. It's where they meet their friends, and where Mr. Percival tells them what to do. The engines often have adventures. Fearless Freddy is an old engine, but he wanted everyone to know that he was still the fastest engine in the hills. Scarloe and Rheneas said they were the fastest engines. So it was decided that they would have a race. Freddie found out that he wasn't as fast as he used to be. Freddie decided to puff down some old tracks. They would get him to the finish line first. Rheneas and Scarloe were still puffing faster and faster, until Rheneas bounced right off the track and down the mountain. Fearless Freddie went to rescue him. He told him he wasn't the fastest anymore. Peter Sam had his own adventure. Scarloe had told him a story. It was about an old engine, Proteus. Proteus's lamp was magic. Peter Sam didn't believe the story. But then, strange things started to happen. First, he felt a strong rush of wind. Then, he heard a strange creaking sound. And lastly, he saw a bright light flashing on and off. Maybe Peter Sam had found the magic lamp. But as he puffed closer, he saw the bright lamp was just Harold. Another day, Duncan found a disused track. He wanted to have an adventure too. It led into an old mine. Duncan was very excited. But then he crashed into an old roof support. It collapsed. Duncan was trapped. He tried to go forwards, but there were buffers, and the buffers squeaked. It was the sound of squeaky wheels. Duncan knew the buffers must be on freight cars. With one mighty puff, Duncan bashed the cars through an old exit. He was outside again. He couldn't wait to tell the other engines. So that's why the high hills are very special for Duncan. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's the quarry. The quarry is a very important place. Engines come and go, pushing and pulling freight cars loaded with heavy slate and stone. The quarry is also where steamies and diesels can work together, which isn't always easy. One day, Percy brought freight cars to the quarry. He peeped his whistle to tell Harry and Bert he was there. They thought it was a silly sound. Percy was very upset. He thought his whistle was better than a nasty horn. Later, Percy returned to the quarry. This time, Percy blew his whistle with all his puff and power. Harry and Bert nearly jumped out of their engines. Another day, Thomas and Percy were trying to stay especially clean. The railway inspector was going to give a prize to the cleanest engine. Thomas and Percy wanted to win. Suddenly, there was a rumble and a tumble. Thomas was covered from footplate to fender in quarry dust. But Thomas wasn't worried. Soon I'll be as clean as any engine, he tooted. And soon he was. There are two other engines who work at the quarry a lot, and they are Mavis and Diesel. One day, Thomas arrived to help them. Diesel thought this was a wonderful chance to tease Thomas. First, Diesel shunted Thomas under the hopper. Diesel laughed until his wheels wobbled. Then, when Thomas let off steam, Diesel called him a stinky steamy. Diesel was having lots of fun. Salty brought new fuel for all the Diesels. Mavis and Diesel both started to cough and splutter. The new diesel oil had water in it. Diesel wasn't having fun anymore. Then Thomas came to the rescue. He arrived with new diesel oil. Soon, Mavis and Diesel's engines were humming again. "Thank you, Thomas," said Mavis. "You are a very good friend." And even Diesel had to agree. So that's why the quarry is very special for Mavis and Diesel. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right, it's the Sodor Island seaside. All the engines like chuffing by the seaside. They like the fresh sea air. And they like to hear the seagulls calling. Most of all, they like to see the children's happy faces playing on the sand. And there's nothing the children like more on the beach than ice cream. One hot summer, Thomas was working very hard. He had to bring ice cream to the ice cream stall. Thomas didn't want to pull freight cars of ice cream. He wanted to pull passenger cars of happy children. But when he arrived, the children cheered and cheered. Thomas was surprised. They were so happy to see Thomas. He had brought them lots of ice cream. This was the best seaside job of all. But sometimes the weather at the seaside isn't sunny. It's very foggy. One day, Thomas couldn't see where he was going. Thomas was scared. He didn't want to go on. He started to go backwards. But Thomas knew he needed to deliver the deck chairs and windbreakers. "I won't be afraid. I won't be afraid," he chuffed slowly. Thomas's wheels started to creak forward, and his steam puffed proudly. The fog cleared. Thomas could see the cliffs and the sparkling sea. Thomas delivered everything safely and on time. There's one engine for whom the seaside is very special. That's Skarloey. Thomas was to pull Skarloey to the menders. He wanted to show Skarloey the sights of Sodor. The sights Skarloey didn't see in the mountains. But Skarloey didn't think the sights were special at all. Until he saw the sea. It was the most magical thing he had ever seen. Skarloey said he'd never seen anything like it. It was wonderful. Skarloey didn't want to leave the seaside. He wanted to stay looking at it forever and ever. That's why the seaside is very special for Skarloey. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's Tidmouth Sheds. Tidmouth Sheds is a very special place for all the engines. It's where they rest their aching axles at night. Pump their pistons in the morning, and share stories and surprises. No time was more surprising at Tidmouth than Halloween. Sir Topham Hatt told Thomas and Emily to collect iron from the smelter's yard. Thomas and Emily were very excited. Later that night, all the engines were woken up when they heard Thomas's loud whistle. "I'm being chased by a ghost," he tooted. The engines couldn't see a ghost. Percy told him it was only Emily. Thomas felt silly. The engines would all remember this Halloween for a long time. Engines don't only sleep at Tidmouth Sheds. Sometimes they hide there. One night, all the engines were asleep, except Percy. Percy could hear Sir Topham Hatt talking to his driver. He told him Percy had been late too often and must go to the scrap yards. Percy thought Sir Topham Hatt wanted to scrap him. Percy worried all night long. And all the next day. His friend Thomas tried to cheer him up. "Sir Topham Hatt wouldn't scrap a really useful engine," tooted Thomas. "And you, Percy, are a really useful engine." But Percy wasn't so sure. So Percy decided to hide. Later, Thomas chuffed in. He thought his friend might be hiding in the sheds. And he was. Percy looked very small and lonely. He didn't want Sir Topham Hatt to find him. And he didn't want to be scrapped. Sir Topham Hatt was surprised. He had told Percy's driver Percy had been working too hard, and that was why he was late. Percy was to take scrap to the smelters, then carry the mail all week. Percy was so happy he thought fireworks would fly from his funnel. And that's why Tidmouth Sheds is a very special place for Percy. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right, it's Tidmouth Sheds. Every day, Sir Topham Hatt comes here to tell his engines what to do. And every day, the engines leave Tidmouth Sheds to do their jobs. And they return again at night, after a day of being really useful. Once, in the sheds, Gordon kept all the engines awake at night. His firebox made a terrible noise as it cooled down. Percy called him Rattler Gordon. Gordon pretended the other engines all had very bad manners. But really, he felt embarrassed. He didn't want to be called Rattler Gordon. Then, one night, there was a shooting star. All the engines made a wish. Gordon wished to be grander. James wished to be redder. And Percy wished to pull the mail forever and ever. But when Thomas got lost on his way to the power station, Percy changed his wish. Now, he wished for Thomas to return safely to Tidmouth Sheds. When his wish came true, Percy was the happiest engine. But Tidmouth Sheds is especially important for one engine, and that's Emily. Emily used to live on her own at Knapford Yards. One day, Sir Topham Hatt decided to rebuild Tidmouth Sheds, and the engines had to move out. James had to sleep in the dirty, dusty coaling plant. Percy and Henry slept in the smelter's yard, and Gordon slept under a tent. He was very unhappy. Thomas had to move in with Emily in the sheds at Knapford. At first, Emily didn't like Thomas being there. Thomas's sleep whistling kept her awake all night. It made her cross. But one night, Thomas wasn't there. Emily missed Thomas. It was too quiet without him. She even missed his sleep whistle. So when Emily arrived at the new Tidmouth Sheds, she was very happy. An extra space had been built especially for her. Now Emily could be with her friends. And that's why Tidmouth Sheds is very special for Emily. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's the high hills of Sodor. The high hills of Sodor are home to the narrow gauge engines. Rusty, Peter, Sam, and Duncan, Skarloey, Rheneas, Sir Handel, Mighty Mac, and Fearless Freddy. They're all very good friends, and they're all really useful. It takes a lot of puff to chuff up and down, and sometimes the engines run out of puff. One day, a dinosaur skeleton had been discovered in the hills. The narrow gauge controller had given Rheneas the job of taking it to the transfer yards. Rheneas wanted to take the dinosaur all by himself. Rheneas puffed slowly up the steep hill. But the dinosaur was too heavy. His puff was going, and his pistons could hardly pump. Rheneas puffed slower and slower. Then, very sadly, he rolled back down the hill. Rheneas wished his friend Skarloey was there to help him. And then he heard Skarloey's whistle. Rheneas was very happy. He knew that together they would have enough puff to climb any hill. Another day, it was Skarloey who had to huff and chuff up a hill. Skarloey is a brave little engine. He likes to show off and play games. But this time, he broke the winch on the incline. The incline was a very steep hill. Now, no trucks could go up or down. Skarloey felt bad. The villages high in the hills needed coal. He knew there was only one thing to do. He'd have to collect and deliver the coal himself. Skarloey chuffed round bend after bend after bend. The villagers were very pleased to see him. Now they had coal to make their homes snug and warm. But for one engine, the high hills were too much. And that engine was Sir Handel. Sir Handel could no longer climb the hills, but he didn't want to tell anyone. The narrow gauge controller gave Sir Handel a special, but he had to go up a hill. Sir Handel started to huff and puff. Then his pistons popped, his traction rods rattled, and his boiler bubbled and bounced. Sir Handel couldn't go on. So he had to tell the narrow gauge controller all about his problem. The narrow gauge controller had Sir Handel mended in no time. Now Sir Handel chuffs cheerfully up and down the hills once again. So that's why the high hills are very special for Sir Handel. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's Knapford Station. Knapford is the biggest and busiest station on the island of Sodor. Visitors arrive and leave, and Sir Topham Hatt's office is there. It's where the engines want to look their best and show everyone how really useful they are. One day, Edward was sick. He couldn't puff. He thought he would be scrapped. So Thomas chuffed into Knapford Station, pulling Edward's train. He wanted to help his friend. Sir Topham Hatt was very surprised to see Thomas with Edward's freight cars. He wanted to see Edward right away. Later, Edward chuffed sadly and slowly into Knapford. He asked Sir Topham Hatt not to scrap him. Sir Topham Hatt told him he was a really useful engine. Edward was relieved. Knapford Station is also where special winter holiday celebrations take place. One winter, Thomas felt very proud. Sir Topham Hatt had asked him to deliver the toys to the new toy shop at Knapford. But on the day of the grand opening, there was trouble. Thomas wanted to collect the toys and the children. He was trying to do too much. Luckily, Henry was there to help his friend. Henry delivered the cars of toys to Knapford, and Thomas chuffed in with the children. The toy shop was a wonderful sight. The children cheered. But there was one engine for whom Knapford Station is a very special place, and that's Percy. A famous artist came to paint the spirit of Sodor. Percy showed the famous artist Knapford Station. The famous artist didn't like Knapford Station at all. This made Percy very cross. He wheezed a cloud of steam. It blew the famous artist's hat right off his head. Percy was very worried, but the famous artist was excited. He wanted to paint Percy. He told him he was the spirit of Sodor. There was a big party at Knapford Station for everyone to see Percy's painting for the first time. So that's why Knapford Station is very special for Percy. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's the coaling plant. The coaling plant is a very important place on the island of Sodor. All the steam engines need coal, so every day is a busy day at the coaling plant. One day, Thomas had been given shiny new freight cars. He didn't want to get them dirty. So Thomas backed his new cars slowly and carefully under the hopper. But Thomas's new cars wanted to be dirty. So they biffed and bashed just as the coal came out of the hopper. Thomas and the freight cars were covered in coal, but Thomas saw the cars were much happier being dirty. Coal cars are not only dirty, they're heavy. One winter's day, Edward had to work with James. The tracks were very icy. James was in a hurry, but Edward didn't want to rush. James didn't know how very icy the tracks were. His wheels started to slip and slide. James applied his brakes as hard as he could. But it was too late. Luckily, no one was hurt. Working in the coaling plant is dirty work. And some engines like to stay clean. One day, the railway inspector was going to give a prize. James, Gordon, and Emily were each quite sure they'd win. They wanted to find the sunniest spot at the coaling plant to show off their shiny paintwork. James wanted to be in the best place. Then there was trouble. He didn't look where he was going. He reversed into some freight cars that rolled backwards into a lever, which opened the coal hopper and covered the engines in coal. It was a disaster. James, Emily, and Gordon were covered in coal dust. Just then, the railway inspector and Sir Topham had arrived. Gordon blew to clear his funnel, and the railway inspector and Sir Topham Hatt were covered in dust too. So that's why the coaling plant is very special for James. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right, it's Brendam Docks. Brendam Docks is a very exciting place. There are ships and engines, and cargo is unloaded every day. There are always new people to meet and exciting things to collect. One day, Thomas had to collect the circus from Brendam Docks. There were acrobats and clowns, costumes and carriages, and a big brass band. Thomas thought there was nothing more exciting than the circus. The circus was very heavy, but Thomas was determined to pull it all. Another day, Rocky the Crane arrived. Rocky was tall and very strong, but he had no engine. Gordon thought Rocky couldn't be really useful if he didn't have an engine. But Edward wasn't sure if Gordon was right. Rocky looked like a gentle giant. Edward knew that gentle giants are always useful. Once at the docks, Henry had to pick up a new flagpole. But Henry couldn't see the flagpole anywhere. He looked for tall things. He saw the tall masts on the ship, and he looked up at tall Cranky. Then there was trouble. Henry didn't expect to see the flagpole lying flat. Henry felt very silly. Brendam Docks wouldn't be the same without Cranky. Cranky was unloading a very heavy crate on the end of his hook. Inside was an important statue. Thomas was waiting. "I want to see the statue," tooted Thomas. Cranky didn't like being rushed by tooting tank engines. Cranky asked Thomas if he thought the statue was of him. Thomas thought the shape of the statue was exactly like him. He was very excited.
"All those engines think they are more important than anything else on the island,"
Cranky thought crankily. Thomas smiled. That's why Brendam Docks is a very special place for Cranky. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else. The island of Sodor is a wonderful place. Thomas enjoys puffing all over the island. There are lots of special places to visit. Where's this? That's right. It's Brendam Docks. Brendam Docks is where the ships arrive. They bring visitors. Machines for the farms and the factories. Everything the island needs. Once, Percy went to the docks to collect a special red carpet. Salty said maybe it was a magic carpet. He heard tell of those that could fly. Percy wasn't sure. He looked at the carpet. He didn't think it looked magical at all. Then, as Percy pulled away, the red carpet unrolled. Percy gasped. The carpet flew into the air. This was a very special. Another day, Thomas came to Brendam Docks to collect the Admiral. Salty was telling a story about the Admiral searching for the lost pirate treasure of Sodor. Thomas listened very carefully. There were 3 clues as to where you'd find the treasure. Everyone was silent. Thomas hardly dared puff.
"First, you find the eagle of the mountains. Then you find the clouds not in the sky."
Thomas had heard a lot of Salty sea stories, but this was the best ever.
"Those clouds would lead you to the skull and crossbones. And there you'd find the treasure."
Salty chuckled. The Admiral stepped down the gangplank. He looked very smart. Later, Salty heard what happened. When Thomas arrived at the Maritime Museum, Thomas had found all the clues. And the Admiral had been so excited, he had dug for the treasure himself. He had found a great wooden box. Inside was all the buried treasure. Thank you, Salty, Thomas tooted. Thomas was very happy. And Salty was very happy too. Every day, Salty hears wonderful stories about the sea. That's why Brendam Docks is a very special place for Salty. There are so many special places on the island of Sodor. Next time, Thomas will show us somewhere else.